Hi, dear listeners. Welcome to the Overcoming Your Story podcast with your host, Miriam Joku. Today, our guest is Emmanuela Alimlim. I'm so happy to have you on the podcast, Emmanuela. Emmanuela and I met at the Mastercard Foundation. She's an amazing human being, and I'm sure you enjoyed the conversation. Please, Emmanuela, introduce yourself to our listeners.
Thank you, listeners, and thank you, Miriam, for inviting me. Hello, everybody. My name is Emmanuela Alimlim, and I was born in Kenya and currently living in Canada since 2013, and I'm really grateful and happy to be here with you.
Yes. So, Emmanuela, before we even worked together, I think I read one of your posts on LinkedIn where you were sharing on your trip, about your trip when you left Kenya to come to the University of Toronto, and it made me cry. It was in the middle of the night. The writing, the what you were sharing, it resonated so much with me. Can you share a little bit how you grew up and how you came to take that trip?
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So I grew up in the northern part of Kenya called in the Samburu County. And I grew up like every normal kid with my mother, with my extended family, my siblings. And then, as you know, if you grew up on the African continent, at some point you go live with your grandmother. At some point you go live with your aunt. So I will say that I grew up in my community, everyone chipping in to support all of us. Although we were so many, I'm really happy that I had a culture, a support system with me. How I like to characterize that is I grew up socially and culturally rich, but economically I was poor. So although we didn't have a lot, I was surrounded by laughter and all of that. And so I think for me, having that, I always knew that I wanted more. I knew that there was a lot of things outside of where I grew up. I knew that the world was too big, and I did not want to be confined in this village where I grew up. And so the only thing that really made sense for me to expound my knowledge and knowing is to study, like most people. Education was the pathway that made sense for me to get out of that village. And so I was really hard on my studies.
Did you have role models? How? Because I know you were really good at school, and you are a big sister. I think you're the eldest of 12 children.
Yes. So this is the thing. Where I grew up, I would say there weren't really models. Who was I going to look up to? There wasn't anyone. So for me, surprisingly, the people who really made me want to do things were my teachers. And that's why I credit a lot of, my becoming to teachers.
Oh, wow. I love hearing that, because they say a child who goes through adverse childhood experiences, what can make a difference at the end of the day are those positive experiences, those people who could be even external to the family, who help the child become someone. So for you, those people were your teachers, right?
Yes, that's correct, Miriam.
Who believed
Yes.
in you. Oh, that's amazing. So how did you come to leave your village? I remember we were in a conversation and we were sharing, and you were telling me how you saw even elephants when you were going to school, and I love that story so much.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes, that's why I was saying I grew up very culturally rich, right? That story is we were very mischievous kids, so we would get water from the river. These are tales told by people, and people probably don't believe, but people who I grew up would probably believe this. And so the river was called Ewasonyiro, and so in the evenings after school, we would go to get water. But on the other side of the riverbanks, there were a lot of elephants, and we were on this side to collect water. So of course we were very mischievous, and we threw stones and sticks to make them to come and chase us. But there's water current that would break the speed, and we would repeat the same thing. Yeah, so those are the things I grew up with that could
Yeah.
really look far fetched to other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Coming from the village, that sounds like a normal fun. Yeah. So how come you left your Samburu? So in what circumstances did you leave Samburu?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Miriam. I think for me, I really didn't. I knew that I was more than what my village was or is. And so, education was something that really made sense to me. It was the only pathway that, seems that I could do it. There was nothing else around me. And so I graduated high school with the help of a sponsor who paid all my high school fees. And then from there, I was interning at Equity Bank in Kenya in one of their branches. And then there was this opportunity, people applying to study abroad. And I was like, wait, what? People actually can go and study outside? I was like, well, why don't I myself try it, right? Do you
Yeah.
want me to do the SATs? I was like, let me try it. And I think for me, just recognizing that actually this is something people can do it. I saw people doing it and I was like, okay, let me try it. And it happened that I tried it and I got in. And that's why I got on the plane and came to Toronto in 2013.
Wow. It's such an amazing story when you think of it from your life in the village and all the hard work, the struggle, no role model to come and get on that plane by yourself, to come to a new country to study. That's wow. Congrats to you.
Thank
I
you.
know
Thank you,
it's been a
Miriam.
path. Yeah, it's been a path. And it doesn't show on your face. I know it from work. I could hear your laughter from every corner of the office. Your beautiful laugh. Everybody knows your laugh. It's a signature laugh. But I know it's not been easy. So, how was it when you arrived in Canada? What were your first impressions? Even like taking the plane. I remember when I took the plane because I never knew I would take a plane one day. But so, how was it for you?
Surprisingly, I was almost late to come to school. So what they did, they decided to buy me a business class. Listen, I had never taken a plane. I never knew what's the difference between the different classes. And so I was just queuing in the same line, and when I came there, the lady was like, "Oh, your line is there," and I'm like, "Okay." And then I entered the plane. I'm like, oh my God, what is this? I had
Yeah.
never gone on a plane. And here I'm sitting on a business class. And then I came to Toronto and all the buildings, we do take a lot of, we really grew up without seeing the technological advancement of a lot of things. So for me, I was shell shocked to see a lot of things that were normal to people, but to me was the learning process at the same
Mm.
time, right? From food to the weather to how people, even the simplest thing, how they greet each other, those were new to a lot of us. And of course, it comes with a lot of its challenges, but also a lot of growth that comes in learning new culture and new ways of living in a totally new space. For me, I would say I struggled a little bit to adjust. But yeah, I would say that.
Yeah. That's wow. Yeah. What month did you arrive in Toronto? I hope it was not in the winter.
Oh no. It was September. So I got here
Okay.
and it was still a little bit, it was warm and beautiful and and all. It was during orientation of students and you see a bunch and massive students everywhere. So I was like, wow, this is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so so the topic is about mental health. So now you're in a new country, you're by yourself, you're starting your studies at university. How is Emanuela doing mentally? How is she apprehending this new environment? It's so different from everything, right?
Yeah, I think for me, now that I'm reflecting back, there was just a lot of newness. There was a lot of Eden trauma.
Mm,
There was a lot of things that I think it felt like a mixing pot of everything, and then it erupted.
mm,
So for me, just a lot of trauma, a lot of trying to become who I'm supposed to be, right? Somehow I've left my village. That signifies a sense of a role model to other people, even my family. So for me to come here, I'm carrying a lot of heaviness on my back, on my shoulder. And so that expectation really did put a lot of pressure on myself. And so mixing trauma, expectations, the reality of things, that it's not easy to adjust to a new culture, it's not easy to adjust to a new education system. And so I found really myself a lot of times very depressed, very very depressed, and quite lonely in this world. And it's a very dark place to be, especially for somebody um, whose blackness, or as a woman, you're not supposed to be on the top of the world. So for me, it was somehow I was drowning, not somehow, I was absolutely drowning. And at any point, I could not swim, or I could not reach out my hand to even paddle, or even to reach on top of the water. And so that went for a long time, that I was in this some sort of darkness, and depression and confusion. What am I even supposed to do here?
mm,
The black woman super syndrome came in, right?
mm,
And so it was a struggle for a lot of time.
mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that with us, because I know it must not have been easy. There's such a price we pay when we are the first, right? The first in the family to go to high school, the first in the family to go to university. And in your case, the first in the family to leave your country, the first to go
Mhm.
to university, because since you're the firstborn, that responsibility of being the firstborn already, right? And you said the example for other younger people in the village. It's really, there's a price we pay for being the first in spaces, because there's no light in front of us to pull us ahead. We have to create that path, and by trial and error, it can become really very heavy. So, and I don't know, when I know often in the African context, we are so much in survival that we don't take care of our feelings, right?
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
you get to university, it's kind of, so you're safe because um, you're in a context where you have a scholarship, so you're at last safe economically, and then all the emotional baggage that's been there just
Mhm.
comes crashing, kind of. Yeah.
Mhm.
So how did you manage to get help? Because I know it's not easy reaching out and asking for help. How did you overcome that?
you know and this is a struggle for most people, even right now, seeking help when in need, seeking help when you're really at the rock bottom. I think most of us struggle with that. And for me, I think the driving force for me to actually now swim up and breathe again was the fact that I love my family. I love them so much. And so there was that inner calling, be like, we love you. It would repeat over my head every day. And so I was like, if I don't do this, I don't think anyone would even know what's going on with me. And I just decided, let me do it. And I did it on my own. I found the resources, where to go, who to talk to, how I'm going to pace myself in terms of the coping skills that I learn, and following through the process itself, really staying the course of the treatment. and getting through with it. So for me, seeking help, I think, was the hardest and most rewarding thing I've ever done in terms of, unpacking my emotional baggage.
Wow. So, what modalities did you try? Did you try therapy? Just for listeners out there who are not
Mhm.
at that point yet, you know?
Yeah, I think for me, most were therapy. I did, I think, weekly, bi weekly therapy. I was also hospitalized for some time. So that forced me to go through an intensive CBT or DBT training, all of that. After that, I also had the monthly call with a psychotherapist for almost 6 months. So for me, really, going back to therapy and really laying it down. This is what happened to me. This is what I'm expected to do. And this is who I am right now. So, can we bring all this thing together and find and unpack these emotions? And also, I think one thing that came out of it was the fact that I really love music, and music became my
Mm.
therapy in some way, on top of seeking professional help and following through trainings. Music also became a part of me and my identity.
Oh, that's so amazing. I had a music question towards the end, so it's good you bring that in now.
Oh,
Because
Miriam.
I was going to ask you about your rumba because I love your taste in Congolese rumba. It's just, I don't know, it's just so amazing. It's not of this time. You know music that of your age you're not supposed to know. Let me be a bit disrespectful there. I'm like, how does she know this music? I know, for me, for example, I know because I was in the village. Okay, you were also
Mhm.
in the village, but I don't know. Like, you tell us how you know this real, you know,
Yeah,
gem.
okay. Yeah, we can talk about music, right? So for me, I think uh, of course, as you know, I love Congolese rumba music, the Madilu system, the Franco,
Oh
the
yes.
Kofi, and I think I grew up listening to it. So the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation, it's a news channel. They play it every day when I was young, and and then for some time, I think that's what happened in life. You really forget things. Life happens, and then when I came here to Canada, one day I don't know what I was doing on my computer, and one of the song played. Oh my god, the emotions, the feeling, the nostalgia all just came to me, and there was this sense of happiness that I just, you cannot explain. It's intangible. And I just went that route, and I never looked back, and I just was so blown by how much music makes me happy and grounds me to, I don't want to say where I was or how I felt, but that's how it really makes me. Yeah, and that's why I picked up Congolese. I'm sorry, Kenyans, I'm Kenya, but I just happen to like Congolese music.
Yeah. I mean, they have really great music, right? So yeah, it makes sense. It
Mhm.
makes sense. So what else did I want to ask you? Do you listen to other music than Congolese rumba?
Yes,
Of
I
course.
do. I listen to classical music. I listen
Mm.
to, the likes of Andrea Bocelli, the tenors. I also listen to a lot of hip hop, but apparently I am not up to speed with what's happening. I can listen to old school of DMX, God rest his soul in peace, the likes of Kanye. They're really old school music, Eminem, and of course
Mm.
Afrobeat. Afrobeat is
Yeah.
also something. Oh, one thing I actually recently picked is old school South African music. The likes
Yeah.
of Yvonne Chaka Chaka,
Oh
Brenda
yes.
Fassie. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was
Good
like,
stuff. Good stuff.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I also
Yeah.
listened to those.
Okay, okay. That's amazing. I love listening to those too. Yeah. So I know that at the University of Toronto, you created a lot of initiatives. Despite your personal struggles, you put
Mm-hmm.
in place many things. I think an association of
Mm-hmm.
not Kenyan, East African students,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you also wrote an you also created a documentary. I think you wrote it, you directed it. Yes, you wrote and directed a documentary called Invisible Despair in 2017. I watched it. I really, really loved it. I think all our listeners should go watch your documentary on YouTube. Can you tell us a bit about your activities and the documentary?
Oh, thank you, Miriam. You know, one thing I recognized while I was at the University of Toronto was I think everybody has their own struggle. But the thing that makes a difference is the person that takes the first step to do something. And for me, I knew that connecting to students and having that platform for peer sharing, peer mentoring, peer coaching, and just celebrating our identity was really critical to our academic and also social progress. And so that's when we started the Eastern African Student Association and would put a lot of events. And people that usually were reclusive or stayed on their dormitories were showing up just because there was a platform to do that. And I think that's really critical in bringing people together. And also, I think with my struggle with depression, I knew that, okay, so this is happening across, the university, but also across our systems, and our communities. What can I do? What am I good at? I don't know if I'm good at it, but I put together a proposal and I was funded by the University of Toronto to really write and direct a documentary on mental health across the University of Toronto St. George campus. And this really, getting students from different culture, getting students with different type of mental illness, getting professors to share their experience,
Yeah.
getting getting the vice chancellor, who are people who are decision makers. How does the system work? Getting the head of health and wellness to share her perspective. So it was not just one dimensional. I needed to bring all voices together so that we can really find where's the breakdown in communication and where do we need to invest heavily in supporting our students. And a lot of things came out of that. There was a task force that was formed,
Oh,
and
wow.
some of the implementation really went well in terms of trainings professors to be able to support students, putting a lot of resources in hiring a lot of psychosocial support, psychotherapists, also recognizing that institution itself is not an homogeneous group of young men and women, but also really people from different cultures. So bringing support from different culture to contextualize the treatment was also really important, and that came out of that. So I'm really proud of what I did with the documentary.
Wow, that's really amazing. I didn't know, yeah, the aftermath of that. So, yeah, that's really great for the students who came after you.
Mhm.
So, now, sorry. The next question I want to ask you, when do you think the childhood you led impacted you, and in what way? That's a big question, you know. Your childhood, do you think it had an impact on you? Um, and in what way?
Oh yeah, that's deep, Miriam. How does my childhood impact me? I think somehow I credit a lot of things. I mean, there were the good and the bad and the ugly as a kid. Some things that you probably even don't want to say out loud. But I think in most cases, there is that feeling of, if the bad did happen to you, I'm always very conflicted. Does really pain come to transform someone? It's the
Hmm.
feeling of hopelessness when you're a kid really gives you the courage to go forward. And for me, I think my childhood did have a lot of different dimensions, and I think both, either the good or the bad, did contribute to who I am. But if I
Mm-hmm.
could go back and say, could I change the bad? Absolutely. I don't think as a kid you really want to live in a space that has this dark memory in your soul that sits on your shoulder for the rest of your life, and it
Yeah.
will need a lot of unpacking to do. I don't think that's fair to children. um, and I think for me, if I could go back, if I was a young kid, I probably would not want to grow in a system or in a household that was full of those pain that I, right now as a young woman, if I think about them, they really bring pain to me. Even the fact that I've gone through treatment, it doesn't end just because you've gone through all this type of, coping skill. It doesn't. It's a
Yeah.
lifelong thing that you stay with it. It's just a matter of, it lessens each day, but it's just a matter of, moving forward, recognizing that those things happened to you. But I don't think it was fair to most of kids who go through those things.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. That's exactly the reason why I started Overcoming Your Story podcast, because we have to realize, because most of the time in our community, they say, oh, that was a long time ago. You have to forget it. Or where is that person right now? You're better off than them. But actually, it's a soul wound that stays with us. We have to somehow manage that all our lives, actually. We always have to take care not to go to that dark place. There's always, it's like, yeah, it's a continual management of our well-being, of our
Mm-hmm.
mental well-being, to stay well and to stay mentally fit, because we have things that we have to carry.
Mm-hmm.
And as you say, things change with time, but it starts with awareness and acceptance,
Mm.
accepting that that's our story. For
Oh.
the I ran away from my story a long time. I didn't want to accept it. I was
Hmm.
angry. But when we are aware and then we accept that that's my life. I want to be that kid who had two parents, and who had food when she came back from school. But no,
Nope,
that's
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 not the
fiction. That's fiction there, right there. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and I really love the fact that you've brought in the acceptance part. Most of, and I think it's something that it's a quote that I read from one of Rene. I don't know if it's Rene Brown, but one of the authors, and she says something around most things will be okay, but not everything. You'll put up a good fight and realize it's time to let it go. Acceptance is a small, quiet room. Acceptance is a small, quiet room. And so, for me, as you asked me that question, I went back to acceptance. The fact that my pain was sitting in this room, and I acknowledged it, that it was a pain that happened to me, but I was also accepting it, and letting it sit in this quiet room. And so, I'm really happy that you brought in the fact about acceptance.
Yeah. And you're right. It's when we accept that we can also let go, and
Mm-hmm.
also forgiving ourselves, because when things happen to us in childhood, it's a protective mechanism of the brain. So the child will think it's their fault. It's my fault if I'm treated like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's my fault if my mommy doesn't want to live with me. So that's because if you think it's your caregiver's fault, then it's not possible. The child, like you will die, because so the child will always turn on themselves. So as
Mm-hmm.
adults, we have to recognize that and forgive ourselves that it was not our fault. We were
Mm-hmm.
children, we were helpless, and but today we are not helpless anymore. So
Mm-hmm.
and it takes just awareness, just knowing what happened to us, accepting it, and then we can start working on it. Then that 5-year-old that was hurt is not in the driving seat anymore and making us take crazy decisions for our lives.
Mm-hmm.
you know I found there's something you said that I found so beautiful. You said, I don't need to get A's in class to be successful. And I found
Mm-hmm.
that so powerful, because in the documentary, you were saying how you were meant to be Nelson Mandela, you were meant to be Malala. And then,
Mm-hmm.
but at the end, you're talking about your path,
Mm-hmm.
Emmanuela's path, because yeah. Do you want to share a bit about that?
Yeah, thank you, thank you. In some sort, we are really, and I don't know if it's me, but I'm really sometimes expected or mirrored to be, this powerful person, this a change maker in my community, someone who comes and bring change suddenly. And I don't think that's fair to put that burden on us, and especially for people like ourselves who are already carrying a lot of others, in others meaning our community, our siblings, carrying our own emotional baggage. And I think really following through your own journey doesn't have to be mirrored to somebody else. You could get inspiration from them, you could get their values, how they lived their life, but following that, I think for me, could be a death to who you are. Um and and one thing I think, as I gain each day on this earth, I look back and I'm like, I don't necessarily think getting A's in university or on your academic work makes you a good person. Or I think for me, living a purposeful life involves living an authentic life to who you are, living with your values, carrying your ethical values with you. And you do not need to be this change maker for you to be recognized as a good person. And I think most people need to stop putting that expectation, especially on people who are coming from marginalized community, because then if you don't do something in 1 or 2 years, everybody's looking at you, be like, oh, but Emanuela, you went to study abroad. We expected you, right? That's the word most people use. We expected you to come back and transform my community. And that goes back in those six years. What was I doing? I was handling my own emotional turmoil. I did not have the space to think about others. And so, and I think this is something that could really, a lot of people need to create awareness on things that we say to a lot of people, and especially those who are really trying to take one step each day to live this life. So yeah, you need to forge your own path, get what works for you, and move on.
Thank you so much. That's such a beautiful message. I always felt that when young people are trying their best with already a lot of baggage, and there's a lot of expectation, they have to go and build their communities
Mm-hmm.
and do this and that. I think if they do what you did, take care of
Mm-hmm.
that emotional baggage and feel fine with themselves, acknowledge the path, you know, how far they've come. Like, look how far you've come, Emanuela.
Mm-hmm.
That in itself, it's victory for me, you know.
Exactly.
Tomorrow, if you become a parent, you will do different because you are transforming yourself. And that it's in itself, it's changing your community, you
Mm-hmm.
know. It's not just going and creating an initiative, it's taking stock of what happened and transforming yourself. For me, there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing more beautiful than that because everything starts with the self. And
Mm-hmm.
this is a message I hope that we go out to other young people who might feel pressure to do things at a pace, at this, I'm supposed to do it when they're suffering so much inside,
Mm-hmm.
you know. As you said, take your time, forge your path, you know.
Yeah, you cannot be pouring from an empty cup. You cannot
Yeah.
be pouring from an empty cup. And you cannot, burn yourself as you light others. Then you will be dead, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And also, you all the accolades from outside will not compensate for, if you don't consider yourself, nothing from outside will come and make you love yourself. That
Mm-hmm.
transformation has to be a personal journey. Yeah, I really really loved our conversation. I wanted to ask you, so what do you like eating, Emanuela? So let's make it a bit lighter.
Oh, Miriam, Miriam, Miriam. What do I like eating? Okay,
Yeah.
I eating. Well, I thought you were going to ask me what do I like drinking. Okay.
Oh, I could ask you that just right after.
Okay, so I cook. I can say I cook a lot at home. I like to cook home. I rarely eat out, so I
Mm.
like to try new recipe. But of course, my favorite food happens to be chapati and
Mm.
lentils. So if I'm going to make chapati, lentils has to be there. But I can say I'm a foodie. I try a new recipe. The other day I made Singaporean something.
Mm.
So yeah,
Chicken or what?
was it Singaporean? I think it was chicken. Yes, it was. It was like a really dense and very very delicious food. I made it. I followed the recipe and it came out
Mm.
good. So I guess I can say now I'm a certified chef.
That's amazing. You know what? You know that in like healing methods like cooking, spices, they're very grounding actually. I also
Mhm.
love trying recipes, and it's like creating something, right?
It's
It's beautiful.
artistry. It's
Yeah,
artistry.
yeah, it's
Right.
artistry.
It's
Yeah,
artistry as you paint, as you put each spice, as you it has
yeah.
this feeling. Okay, now I'm going deep, but it's
Yeah, no,
beautiful.
really. Yeah, everywhere I go, I look for where I can get spices. I just
Mhm,
love that. Yeah, and then I check out recipes. But these are things we do for ourselves, and it's amazing. Did I have a final question? Oh yeah, I wanted to ask you. Today, you work with young people. In
mhm,
your work, you work with young
mhm,
Africans a lot. What would you want to tell young Africans? What message would you, young African women?
mhm.
Um,
Thanks, Miriam. And yes, I work. Most of my work revolves around supporting young women from the continent and from the African continent. And I think for me, is the fact that be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. Also recognizing the process is not going to be linear. It's full of ups and downs, tons, disappointments, but at the same time, just take each step one at a time. You know, get to a place where you are able to put boundaries on what you can and what you cannot do. And also just that voice that's inside you, your intuition will tell you, I cannot do this, and be comfortable with saying no. But at the same time, just take that one step at a time. Do you need to finish your paper? Do it. Do you need to say hello to your family? Do it. But just be kind to yourself and know that the process is not going to be linear, and be grateful. Always be grateful, and show a sign of gratitude to your being.
yeah, that's amazing. Wow, thank you so much, Emanuela.
Thank you,
It was
Miriam.
it was a wonderful conversation with Emanuela on the Overcoming Your Story podcast. So maybe another time for another
Yes.
discussion.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Miriam, and looking forward to hearing more from other speakers and learning from them.
Oh, thank you, Emanuela.